The AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT arrives in an odd state for the graphics card industry. Right now, NVIDIA has 5 graphics cards aimed at the 1080p segment, even compared to the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060. A graphics card that straddles the line between 1080p and 1440p gaming. The Radeon RX 5600 XT beats it at a lower price. So, while NVIDIA has absolutely saturated its market with 4 graphics cards targeting the same resolution, AMD has done the same with just 2 cards, and still beats NVIDIA at every price point. And sure, with the RTX 2060 NVIDIA offers ray tracing and deep learning supersampling. But when you're after raw performance for the price, it makes more sense to go with a Radeon graphics card in 2023 than ever before. The AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT is available right now, starting at $279, with some cards obviously going higher in price, depending on manufacturer and model. The Radeon RX 5600 XT we were provided with for review is the Sapphire Pulse model, which carries a slight factory overclock and a dual BIOS, and retails for $289. When we were briefed on the Radeon RX 5600 XT, AMD made sure to compare it against the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 Ti, which launched for the same $279 price point, though you can find it for around $269. At this price point, AMD absolutely comes out on top. But what's more impressive is how the card compares with the more expensive GeForce RTX 2060. After the RTX 2060 Super came out, the original RTX 2060 saw price cuts down to $349, but prices have fallen even more since then. However, even at that lower price point, NVIDIA's entry-level ray tracing card fails to topple the Radeon RX 5600 XT. The AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT falls right between the Radeon RX 5500 XT and the RX 5700, which of course means it's based on the same 7nm RDNA graphics architecture. What's surprising, though, is how much beefier the RX 5600 XT is than the RX 5500 XT. But the RX 5600 XT bumps that all the way up to $2,304. The same amount in the AMD Radeon RX 5700. Unlike the Radeon RX 5700, memory capacity in the memory bus get a cut to 6GB and 192-bit, respectively. That means the RX 5600 sees a big cut in 1440p performance. But it is still playable. We get that's the same amount of VRAM found in the GeForce GTX 1660 Ti. But AMD already packed the Radeon RX 5500 XT with up to 8GB. So we can't imagine why the cut was made here. If we had to guess, we'd say it's a measure to keep the price low, but it's still disappointing. And of course, we can't talk about graphics cards in 2023 without bringing up ray tracing. Now, we know that AMD will have ray tracing in some capacity at some point. The amount of PC games out there that will let you enable ray tracing grows with each passing day, and AMD graphics cards simply can't handle these effects. So even if you have a passing interest in ray tracing right now, you're going to want to go with the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060. The performance is about equal between the RTX 2060 and the Radeon RX 5600. So really what you're picking is either raw performance or spending $20 more to get in on the ground floor of NVIDIA's ray-traced future. Don't think this means that AMD doesn't have plenty of its own tricks, though. Over the last few months, AMD has worked in a ton of software features into its Radeon software. The most impressive new feature here is Radeon Boost. Features like ray tracing and DLSS simply don't matter. What Boost does is sense when your camera is moving quickly and intelligently lowers the resolution of background areas of the scene, greatly improving frame rate when it matters. High movement scenarios, the resolution on things like your gun, other characters and the UI remains the same, which means only things that you're not paying attention to get cuts to resolution. When paired with something like Radeon Anti-Lag, which cuts the amount of time needed to synchronize frames between your GPU and CPU, AMD Radeon starts to look like the right platform for gamers that just want to play esports at high frame rates. Now, we dive into the performance of the Radeon RX 5600 XT. Starting off with the synthetic benchmarks via 3D Mark 11, The AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT is an absolute behemoth. In Firestrike Ultra, not only is the 5600 XT a whopping 30% faster than the GTX 1660 Ti, which, again, is the same price, but it beats the RTX 2060 by 13%. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 does pull ahead in the time spy tests by 8% and 12% in time spy and time spy extreme, respectively. But the fact that these graphics cards are this close in the first place is pretty amazing. In Metro Exodus with Ultra settings, the AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT is 5% faster than the RTX 2060 and 20% faster than the GeForce GTX 1660 Ti. But, in Middle-earth, Shadow of War, NVIDIA's hardware does much better, with the RTX 2060 pulling ahead by 12% at 1080p. But, it's important to note that the GTX 1660 Ti doesn't beat the RX 5600 XT in a single test. However, there's an elephant in the room, and it's the VBIOS controversy. Essentially in response to NVIDIA's price drop of the RTX 2060, AMD released a VBIOS update to its aftermarket partners. Now, originally, we reviewed the RX 5600 XT in its out-of-the-box configuration, and that's what the numbers we've mentioned above are from. But after updating the VBIOS, we found performance jumped up significantly to the point where it absolutely dominates the RTX 2060. Whenever the 6GB of VRAM in the Sapphire Pulse RX 5600 XT wasn't the limiting factor. After updating to the new VBIOS, we found that performance jumped by around 8% in all testing, further widening the gap over the card's original target, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 Ti. We could go on all day about why AMD's choice to do this last-minute update was shady and harmful to consumers, but we've been assured that unless you picked up a graphics card on release date, you likely won't have to worry about updating the VBIOS yourself.